Welcome English 1102 friends. This is a video that goes in the Gothic and Grotesque module, and this is a video covering two poems, Death of a Young Son by Drowning by Margaret Atwood and Midterm Break by Seamus Heaney. Margaret Atwood, as I'm making this video, you can see she's still alive, born in 1939. She's most famous now for writing The Handmaid's Tale, and then Seamus Heaney died a few years ago. He was at the time of his death a few years back, the most famous living Irish poet. And you get some kind of like Irish culture in this, like the boarding school and that kind of stuff. Both of these poems are very Gothic poems in the sense that one of the central ideas of the Gothic, as it's defined and understood in literary terms, is that there is this kind of darkness, and there are really two sources of darkness. And you get this in a lot of Edgar Allan Poe novels, who is sort of the father of the Gothic in American literature. But the two sources of that darkness and danger are that there's something out in the world, and sometimes it gets you. And the other source is that there's a darkness inside us, inside people, and sometimes it gets triggered or the switch gets flipped and it just comes out. Both of these poems, and the reason I put them together is they're both Gothic poems because they have that darkness, and in both cases the darkness is out in the world. And what both of these poems are about is the darkness getting some innocent person. And in both cases it is a child. In one case it is the son, in this case Death of a Young Son, it's clearly the son who drowns. And in the other case, Midterm Break, it is a brother who gets hit by a car and killed. And so there is this darkness with both of these poems, and it is the same source of darkness, that darkness, and sometimes the world just reaches out and gets you in this sad and tragic and Gothic way. And so we're going to go through both of these poems, both of them very clearly sad poems dealing with the loss of, some, like I said, some young person, some innocent person who gets taken away by tragic circumstances. This poem, one of the central structure of this poem is that the son, you get her dealing with the birth canal. He came out of water, and it's water that takes him away again. And you get that right from the beginning. She sets that up right from the beginning of the poem. He who navigated with success the dangerous river of his own birth, the birth canal, the fluid in your stomach when when a woman's pregnant, when you're a fetus, when you're in utero, and then you come down the birth canal. So you come into this world, through water and down the birth canal. Once more set forth on a voyage of discovery into the land I floated on but could not touch to claim. His feet slid on the bank. So the son slides into a river, and you find out later that it's springtime and maybe it was wet and the water was up and the grass was slick. His feet slid on the bank, the currents took him, so the kid slides down into the river, the stream, and gets swept away by the water. He swirled with ice and trees in the swollen water. Again, it must be early spring, and Margaret Atwood is Canadian, so Canada is probably still cold. In the swollen water, in spring, the rivers and streams are up because stuff's melting off. And plunged into distant regions, his head a bathysphere. A bathysphere is like a submersible, a round submersible. You'll sometimes see them as little, they get sent out from ships and sunk down into deep parts of the ocean and stuff like that. And so what she's saying is his head becomes this underwater submersible in this tragic way. Through his eyes' thin glass bubbles he looked out, reckless adventurer on a landscape stranger than Uranus. We have all been to, and some remember. And so now, he goes into another world. The child dies and drowns. There was an accident. The air locked. He was hung in the river like a heart. And so the kid gets trapped like under a rock or under a log or something like that. And instead of getting washed along with the creek, he gets trapped underwater. They retrieved the swamped body. Cairn, if you don't know what a cairn is a rock mound, a burial mound. And so what she's saying right here is the body is almost like the son has gone out of the body. It's just the leftovers, the burial mound. Cairn of my plans and future charts with poles and hooks from among the nudging logs. So they have to pull the son out of the river. It was spring. There's the spring part. The sun kept shining. The new grass leapt to solidity. my hands glistened with details. So she's got the body in her hands, and her hands are wet, holding the son's body. After the long trip, I was tired of waves. My foot hit rock. The dream sails collapsed ragged. And so it's like the wind goes out of her ship. Everything sort of collapses. She just feels like collapsing. And I planted him in this country like a flag. And so then she has to bury the son. And like a flag, again, like she's still left behind, like she has to explore this new country without her son, a new world in some sense, because now she has to go forward without her son. And so it is this dark, sad moment where she has to bury the child and go on. A parent's worst nightmare, losing a child, especially in a tragic accident like this. Midterm Break by Seamus Heaney gives you a tragic accident, but it's from the perspective of an older brother. And the older brother is away at school. So the title of this poem, there's an irony to it, because he gets a break from school, but it's the worst kind of break. It's the like getting pulled out of school for some horrible thing, like some bad reason. And that's where the poem starts from, is him waiting at his boarding school to come get picked up. If you've ever been in school, you've had this experience where somebody's going to come and pick you up, and you have to sit in the office and wait for somebody to come get you. I sat all morning in the college sick bay counting bells, nailing classes to a close so you can hear the bells, starting and ending classes, but he's out of that. At 2 o'clock, our neighbors drove me home, because the neighbors come and get him so that his parents don't have to leave. In the porch, I met my father crying. He had always taken funerals in his stride. So the dad's good at dealing with tragedy. Funerals don't really get to him, but in this case, the dad's breaking down and crying because it's his own child. And Big Jim Evans saying it was a hard blow. The baby cooed and laughed and rocked the pram. So there's a younger child, there's a baby. If you don't know what a pram is, it's one of those cradles that has a rocker built in it, so you can just touch it and rock it. When I came in, and I was embarrassed by old men standing up to shake my hand and tell me they were sorry for my trouble. Y'all, if you've ever been to a funeral, you've had this experience where neighbors and friends and family all want to hug you and shake your hand and tell you, how sorry they are. Whispers informed strangers I was the eldest, away at school, as my mother held my hand in hers and coughed out angry, tearless sighs. So now you've got the dad crying, the mom is trying to be strong. And then you get this old Irish tradition where instead of going to a funeral home, they bring the body to your house the night before the funeral, and the family sits with the body. It's an old tradition in the American South. The American South is the last place this kind of hung on. Funeral homes take care of all of this for us now. But at 10 o'clock, the ambulance arrived with the corpse, stanched and bandaged by the nurses, so they're bringing the body. The family's going to stay with it this one last night and get to be with the child this one last night before they bury the little boy in the morning. Next morning, I went up into the room, and so he's going to go upstairs to his brother's room and see him one last time and say goodbye to him. Snowdrops and candles soothe the bedside, so they got candles burning for him in this traditional Irish Catholic way. I saw him for the first time in 6 weeks, because the older brother's been away at school. Paler now, wearing a poppy bruise on his left temple. He lay in the 4-foot box as in his cot, so the brother's already in his coffin. They're going to close him up when they bury him. No gaudy scars, the bumper knocked him clear. So you find out the little brother got hit by a car. It hit him on his left temple and concussed him and killed him. No gaudy scars, the bumper knocked him clear. A 4-foot box, a foot for every year. And so right there, the really sad reveal at the end of this poem that the little boy was only 4 years old, gets hit by a car and killed. So both of these give you this darkness and danger out in the world that reaches out and takes somebody from you, some loved one away from you. This really gothic imagery of the world is a dangerous place and people get unexpectedly taken from you in these sad and tragic ways. So I hope this helps you understand both of these two poems, both of them really heartbreaking poems. I hope this wasn't too dark for you guys. But if you have questions about Margaret Atwood or Seamus Heaney or either of these two poems, just be in touch. And otherwise, I hope this is useful to you. Thanks, everybody.